The awakening signal DR. Elena Frost pushed her dark hair back from her tired eyes as she stared at the cascading data on her workstation. The coffee in her cup had gone cold hours ago, but she barely noticed. For 18 months she had been stationed aboard Lighthouse 7, humanity's most remote deep space monitoring post, listening to the whispers of the cosmos. Most days brought nothing but the usual stellar background noise, pulsar rhythms, and the occasional burst of radiation from dying stars. But today was different. Commander Jake Morrison found her still hunched over her console at 040 station. Time, her fingers dancing across holographic displays that showed wave patterns unlike anything in their databases. Morrison was a career military man, his graying temples and steady demeanor reflecting 30 years of service protecting humanity's expanding frontier. He had commanded Lighthouse 7 for 5 years, and in all that time, he had never seen Elena this focused. "Doctor, you've been at this for 14 hours straight," Morrison said, settling into the chair beside her workstation. "What's got you so captivated?" Elena's green eyes remained fixed on her screens as she replied, "Jake, I think we're looking at first contact, but not the kind we hoped for." She manipulated the display, isolating a specific frequency band. "This signal has been broadcasting for the past 6 days, hidden in what appears to be normal cosmic background radiation. At first glance, it looks like random stellar noise, but watch this." Her fingers flew across the controls, and the seemingly chaotic patterns began to resolve into something more structured. Mathematical sequences emerged from the static, followed by what could only be star charts. Morrison leaned forward, his military instincts suddenly alert. "It's a greeting protocol," Elena continued, her voice tight with concern. "Basic mathematics, universal constants, even a primitive map of our local stellar neighborhood. Someone out there is trying to say hello." Morrison studied the patterns for several minutes before asking, "So why do you look terrified instead of excited?" Elena's response chilled him to the bone. "Because this isn't the whole message. There's something else buried deeper in the transmission, hidden beneath layers of encryption that took me 12 hours to crack." She brought up a secondary display, showing data streams that looked entirely different from the friendly mathematical greeting. "Jake, they're not just saying hello. They're conducting surveillance." The hidden data was extensive and terrifyingly detailed. Population centers on Earth and her colonies, shipping lanes, military installations, defensive satellite networks, even the locations of supposedly secret research facilities. The aliens hadn't just discovered humanity. They had been studying them for decades, mapping their civilization with surgical precision. Morrison felt his mouth go dry. How could they know all this? Long-range observation, intercepted communications, maybe even infiltration? Elena replied grimly. "The level of detail suggests they've been watching us for at least 50 years. Jake, this isn't first contact. This is reconnaissance before invasion." Before Morrison could respond, technical specialist Yuki Tanaka burst into the communications center, her usually calm demeanor replaced by barely controlled excitement. Yuki was the youngest member of their 3-person crew, a quantum communications expert whose brilliance with alien technologies had earned her a place on Lighthouse 7 despite her age. "Commander, Dr. Frost, you need to see this immediately," Yuki said, her words tumbling over each other in her haste. "I've been monitoring subspace channels like you ordered, and something incredible is happening. The signal isn't just going to Earth. It's being broadcast simultaneously to 12 different star systems." Elena and Morrison exchanged glances. "Which systems?" Morrison asked. "All of them with significant human presence," Yuki replied, pulling up a galactic map on the main display. "New Geneva, Port Royal Station, the mining consortium at Kepler 442, even the research outposts at Wolf 359. Commander, They know about every major human settlement. Morrison stood slowly, his mind racing through the implications. If the aliens had this level of intelligence about human civilization, any response from Earth would be too little, too late. Traditional military doctrine assumed humanity would have time to prepare, to mobilize fleets, and coordinate defenses. But these aliens had already completed their homework. "Yuki, can you trace the signal's origin?" Morrison asked. "Already done, Commander. It's coming from the Vanguard Nebula, approximately 47 light-years from Earth. Based on the signal strength and propagation patterns, I estimate they have a fleet of at least 800 vessels." Elena felt her heart sink. 800 ships against humanity's scattered defensive forces would be a massacre. Earth's entire space navy consisted of perhaps 200 vessels, spread across dozens of star systems. The colonies had their own patrol fleets, but nothing that could stand against a concentrated invasion force. "We need to warn Earth immediately," Elena said, turning to her communication array. But Morrison caught her arm gently. "Wait," he said quietly. "Before we send that message, I need to show you both something. Something I was hoping we'd never need to use." Morrison led them to a sealed section of the station they had never been permitted to enter. His command codes opened 3 separate security doors, each requiring biometric confirmation. The final chamber was small and sparse, containing only a single communication console and a wall display showing a star map of human space. 30 years ago, when I was a junior officer, I was briefed on something called Project Lazarus, Morrison began, his voice heavy with secrets he had carried for decades. The military leadership believed that any alien species advanced enough to reach us would likely be hostile, so they prepared for the worst. He activated the console, and the star map came alive with thousands of small indicators scattered throughout human space. Elena and Yuki stared in amazement as the display revealed hidden installations, disguised fleets, and weapon platforms that officially didn't exist. Every cargo hauler, mining vessel, and research station built in the last 50 years has dual capability, Morrison explained. What looks like civilian infrastructure is actually a massive military network waiting to be activated. The freighter that delivered your supplies last month, Elena. It carries enough firepower to level a small moon. Those asteroid mining rigs at Kepler 442, they're weapons platforms that can sterilize an entire star system. Yuki's face had gone pale. "How many ships are we talking about, Commander?" Morrison checked his display. "According to this, we have approximately 8,000 combat-capable vessels, disguised as civilian traffic, supported by over 300 hidden military installations. The aliens think they're facing a primitive species with limited defenses. They're about to discover they've poked a sleeping giant." Elena stared at the display in wonder and horror. "You're saying humanity has been preparing for this war for 50 years? "Longer," Morrison replied. "The project began during the early expansion period, when we first started encountering signs of other civilizations. Our leaders decided that if humanity was going to survive in a hostile galaxy, we needed to be stronger than we appeared." He began entering activation codes into the console. "Dr. Frost, I need you to compile everything we know about the alien signal and transmit it to Fleet Command. Yuki, start broadcasting the Lazarus activation sequence to all hidden assets in this sector. It's time to wake up our sleeping fleet." As they worked, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were crossing a threshold from which humanity could never return. The species that had sent that deceptive greeting was about to discover that their intended victims had teeth, very sharp teeth that had been hidden for generations. The activation signal went out across human space, a coded transmission. That looked like routine traffic control data. But to the right receivers, it was a call to arms that had been decades in the making. Across dozens of star systems, Cargo ships began dropping their peaceful disguises. Mining stations revealed hidden weapon arrays and research facilities. Activated defense systems that could hold off entire fleets. Asterisk. Morrison watched the status indicators change from amber to green as humanity's true military might awaken from its long slumber. The aliens wanted to catch us unprepared, he said grimly. Instead, they're about to face the most patient, paranoid, and prepared species in the galaxy. Elena looked up from her transmission console. Message sent to Fleet Command, along with complete analysis of the alien surveillance data. They'll have everything they need to plan our response. Response? Morrison smiled coldly. Doctor, we're not responding to their invasion. We're about to teach them why no one threatens humanity and lives to regret it. In the depths of space, ancient protocols stirred to life as humanity's greatest secret began to unfold. The aliens had spent decades studying their prey, but they had made one critical error. They had confused peaceful appearance with weakness. That mistake would cost them everything. The response Admiral Victoria Kane stood in the command center of the HSF Retribution, humanity's most powerful warship, watching tactical displays that showed the largest military mobilization in human history. At 62, Kane had spent 4 decades climbing the ranks of the human space fleet, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for commanding 8,000 vessels in humanity's first interstellar war. The bridge around her hung with controlled activity as her staff coordinated the deployment of forces that had been hidden across 50 star systems. What had appeared to be routine civilian traffic just 48 hours ago was now revealing itself as the most sophisticated military deception in galactic history. Admiral, called Captain Sarah Kim from the tactical station. All Lazarus. Assets in the Sol system are reporting full combat readiness. We have confirmation from New Geneva, Port Royal, and the outer colonies. Total combat strength is 8,237 vessels. Kane nodded, studying the holographic display that showed human space in its true form for the first time. The peaceful merchant routes were actually military supply lines. The mining operations were weapons manufacturing centers. The research stations were command and control nodes for a defense network that spanned light years. What's our intelligence on the alien fleet? Kane asked. Commander David Shun, leader of humanity's Stealth Reconnaissance Division, stepped forward. His ship, the HSF Shadowhawk, had been monitoring the approaching alien force for the past 36 hours. Admiral, we've designated them as the Syndicate based on intercepted communications. 1,200 vessels arranged in a standard invasion formation. Their technology appears to be roughly equivalent to what we had 20 years ago. Efficient, but not innovative. Kane raised an eyebrow. 20 years behind us? That's correct, Admiral. Their energy weapons are particle-based. Their shields use standard deflector arrays, and their ships follow conventional design principles. They're expecting to face opponents using similar technology. Chun activated a detailed tactical projection, showing the alien fleet's approach vector. They're planning a direct assault on Earth, confident that their numerical superiority and technological advantage will overwhelm our defenses. They have no idea what they're walking into. Admiral Kane smiled grimly. Humanity's greatest advantage had always been their ability to learn, adapt, and innovate. While the Syndicate had been content with their technological superiority, humans had been pushing the boundaries of physics itself. Their weapons used technologies that wouldn't be theoretical possibilities for most species for another century. Admiral, interrupted Communications Officer Lisa Park, we're receiving a transmission from the Syndicate fleet. They're broadcasting on standard diplomatic frequencies. Put it through, Kane ordered. The voice that filled the command center was cold and mechanical, translated by the ship's computer into standard English. Primitive humans of the third planet, this is Warlord Kethfor, of the Syndicate Armada. Your civilization has been judged unworthy of continued existence. You have consumed resources that could better serve superior beings. Surrender immediately, and your deaths will be swift. Resist, and we will ensure your species suffers for generations. Kane let the message finish before responding. Communications. Open a channel to the entire Syndicate fleet. Channel open, Admiral. Kane's voice carried the authority of someone who had never lost a battle. Warlord Kethver, this is Admiral Victoria Kane of the human space fleet. You have made two critical errors. First, you assumed we were primitive. Second, you threatened our home. Today, you will learn why those mistakes will cost you everything. She cut the transmission and turned to her tactical officer. Captain Kim, signal all units. Operation Giant's Awakening is authorized. Show them what humanity really looks like when we're angry. What happened next would be studied in military academies for centuries. Across human space, the greatest deception in galactic history came to an end. Cargo ships dropped their false hulls to reveal weapons that could crack planets. Mining stations activated shield generators powerful enough to protect entire star systems. Research vessels unveiled experimental technologies that seemed to violate the laws of physics. The Syndicate fleet, confident in their superiority, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that should not have existed. Instead of the few hundred primitive vessels they expected, their sensors detected thousands of ships, using technology decades beyond their understanding. Warlord Kethver stared at his tactical display in disbelief. This is impossible. Our intelligence showed them to be a primitive species with limited space capability. His science officer, a nervous creature named Lazarus, studied the incoming data with growing alarm. Warlord, their ships are using weapons we don't recognize. Energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. And their numbers ... We're detecting over 8,000 combat vessels. 8,000? Kethver roared. That's impossible. They can't have hidden that many ships. But the evidence was undeniable. What the Syndicate had thought was empty space was actually filled with cloaked vessels, using stealth technology generations ahead of their own. The humans hadn't just been hiding their military strength. They had been perfecting it for decades. Captain Chun's stealth fleet struck first. His ships materialized from quantum shadows directly in the heart of the Syndicate formation, their weapons already firing. The aliens' first warning was the destruction of their command ships. Their communication networks severed before they could even call for help. Admiral Kane watched the battle unfold with professional satisfaction. The Syndicate ships fought bravely, but they were fighting yesterday's war with yesterday's weapons. Human vessels danced through space using gravity manipulation drives that made their movements impossible to predict. Their weapons bypassed shields entirely, using exotic matter interactions that the aliens couldn't defend against. Admiral, reported Captain Kim, the enemy is attempting to retreat. Should we pursue? Kane considered for a moment. The Syndicate fleet was broken, their invasion shattered. But letting them escape would only delay the inevitable confrontation. Other species would hear about humanity's true strength, and some would see it as a challenge rather than a warning. Negative. Captain, let some of them go. They need to carry word back to the galaxy about what happens when someone threatens humanity. The Battle of Seoul lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. Of the 1,200 ships that had come to destroy humanity, fewer than 200 survived to flee back into deep space. They carried with them stories that would reshape galactic politics forever. Warlord Kethver, wounded and aboard one of the few surviving Syndicate vessels, stared at the tactical recordings of the battle. His species had ruled over 17 star systems, had conquered dozens of younger civilizations. They had never encountered resistance like this. Send a message to the High Council, he ordered weakly. Tell them we have encountered something beyond our understanding. The humans are not what they appear to be. They are predators disguised as prey, and they have been waiting for us." Back on the HSF Retribution, Admiral Kane addressed the combined human fleet. "Today, we have announced humanity's presence to the galaxy. Not as victims, not as primitives, but as the species that will not bow to anyone. Let every alien civilization know that Earth and her children are under our protection, and that protection has very sharp teeth." In the weeks that followed, the galaxy learned a new truth. Humanity had spent 50 years appearing weak, while becoming the strongest military force in known space. Species that had considered humans as potential prey suddenly found themselves reassessing their position. Some sought alliances, others retreated to their own territories, but all understood the same message. The sleeping giant was awake, and it was hungry. The Syndicate's invasion had been meant to demonstrate alien superiority over a primitive species. Instead, it became humanity's introduction to galactic society, not as refugees seeking protection, but as the new apex predator that would reshape the balance of power among the stars. Dr. Elena Frost, watching from Lighthouse 7 as the human fleet dispersed back to their hidden positions, reflected on how quickly everything had changed. The signal that was meant to herald humanity's destruction had instead announced their emergence as a galactic power. The aliens had called for dialogue, but humanity had answered with something far more eloquent: the universal language of overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. The galaxy would never be the same. Asterisk.